some of you for the second time. I'm really happy to be here. I know Mesoa has given a similar talk or a talk about a similar topic. And what I want to do today is really go down to the very basics of the question of the nature of Jewish nationalism, of the Jewish nation state, of the thing that we call an Israeli, if it exists indeed, is a question that I want to answer, and really go to the very roots of what we're talking about. And I have to say, I think it's necessary because if I remember one clear thing about this subject from the time I was in the US, I was 3 years in Berkeley as a visiting professor, is that it is very hard for Americans, and including Jewish Americans, to understand, I would say, the nature of a nation state that is not along the American model. That is something different. It's interesting to see how our mind really is used to the model that we have around us, obviously, and it's a bit hard to understand different types and really understand. And when I say understand, I mean legitimize. I mean thinking that another nation state that is built according to completely different or somewhat different logic is a legitimate, democratic, liberal nation state. So that's what I want to try to understand today with you, and to begin with the question that our presentation is headlined with: is there such a thing as an Israeli? And this question was raised in front of the Supreme Court. The Israeli Supreme Court, which is now obviously a lot in the news, raised to the Supreme Court accepted the case or dealt with the case to decide whether an Israeli exists. And here I want to share with you an op-ed from the Haaretz talking about this. Just a second. Let's, so this is what we're talking about. Is there such a thing as an Israeli Jewish nationalism, liberalism, and the abstract individual? And here I'm presenting what I wanted to address. There is such a thing as an Israeli. This is the headline of the Haaretz editorial. And I want to read with you what they're talking about. This is from 2014. In October 2013, the Supreme Court rejected a petition by a group of Israelis who wanted to force the state to register them as members of the Israeli people by changing their affiliation as recorded in the population registry from Jewish to Israeli. The reasoning for rejecting the petition was the existence of an Israeli people, that the existence of an Israeli people has not been legally proven, Judge Hanan Meltzer noted, and it is not proper to encourage the creation of slivers of new peoples. It is hard not to wonder what exactly the basis was for the court's determination that there is no such thing as an Israeli nationality. Does it not suffice that the group of people lives together for decades in a country called Israel to call these people Israeli? The creation of Israeli literature, Israeli art, Israeli music, Israeli theater, Israeli humor, Israeli politics, Israeli sports, an Israeli accent, Israeli grief, are all these not enough to speak of an Israeli people? Israeli identity, which is still crystallizing, consists of a whole mosaic of faith, opinions, and tastes. It is not monolithic and homogeneous, and it is immersed in a deeper than ever conflict that sometimes seems insoluble. But it is no reason to strike at the very existence of Israeli identity. On the contrary, these are its characteristics, and these are precisely the contemporary definitions that sustain it. On the eve of Independence Day 2000, should be proud of it. Okay, so the Supreme Court in Israel had to decide whether an Israeli exists, an Israeli identity as an identity of a whole nation. And it decided that it doesn't exist. It decided that it doesn't exist, even though Haaretz here lists many different characteristics of the Israeli existence. It decided that it doesn't exist, I think, for reasons that we can understand pretty easily. The reason is that for the Supreme Court of Israel, Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people. It is not the nation state of the Israeli people. The Supreme Court wishes that Israel remains the nation state of a single people, which is the Jewish people. And it doesn't want, is my internet connection okay?
It's okay, but maybe just repeat what you just said because you got a little fuzzy there for a second. I don't know why.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I will repeat. I have a backup here, as you can see. I hope I won't need to use it.
You're generally very clear, but if you could just repeat that prior sentence,
right,
because it's the core sentence.
So really, what I said is that the Supreme Court has the view that the state of Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people, and it is not the nation state of the Israeli people. It doesn't want an Israeli people to exist, because if an Israeli people exists, obviously the state is its state, right? It's the nation state of the Israeli people. And we all understand that to be an Israeli, you don't need to be a Jew. Obviously, there are many Arab Israelis, Druze Israelis, Caesarean Israelis, any number of peoples living and being citizens of the Israeli state are Israelis. So that's the reason. That's really the reason the Supreme Court rejected that petition. By the way, this is a second petition, 2013. There was a former petition in the 70s, also requesting to be listed as an Israeli in the registry, and it also was rejected, of course.
And just to interrupt to ask the question, the petition is by Jewish Israelis, and who particularly don't want to have Jewish on their passports and documents. Who is behind this, and why?
Yes. In the 70s, a certain individual petitioned that was not registered as Jewish by religion because his father was Jewish, not his mother. But he could make aliyah according to the law of return, but not be registered as Jewish. So he wanted to be registered as an Israeli. Again, that was disqualified. And now it's a group consisting mostly of Israeli Jews wishing to be called Israeli and not Jewish. They are, of course, very secular and militantly so. And but they were joined by a few non-Jewish Israelis. Okay, so this is the situation, and we're talking a lot about the Supreme Court lately. Obviously, a beacon of liberalism in Israel. And what I want to ask is that, can we legitimize the Supreme Court's decision here from a liberal point of view? So obviously we can legitimize it from, let's say, an ethnocentric point of view. Jews want the state to be their own. They are shoving other peoples away and monopolizing the state's identity as such. Okay, so that's an easy answer to make. But I want to make the case that we can actually legitimize this decision from a liberal point of view. And this is what I want to answer today with you. So in order to do that, I want to, first of all, make very clear the difference between a nation state such as the United States and a nation state such as Israel. And to make this difference clear, I think there's no better way than to just look at the founding text, the founding words that these two states have before us or offer to give us. So I want to give you the opening few sentences of the Declaration of Independence of the United States. You, of course, know them, but I'll just read them very quickly. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature gods entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Okay, very broad, and we know this, and this is the sort of opening stanza of the Declaration of Independence of the United States. Now look at the same stanza in the Declaration of the Establishment of the State of Israel. The land of Israel was the birthplace of the Jewish people. Here their spiritual, religious, and political identity was shaped. Here they first attained to statehood. Here they create cultural values of national and universal significance and gave to the world the eternal book of books. The difference here is telling, and the difference is between a universal, humanistic sort of declaration that simply situates a certain country in the history of human events, and a very particularistic declaration that talks to a certain people's faith and a certain people's history. The focus here is completely different. Now, after the declaration, the presentation, the preface to these declarations, we have passages concerning rights. I want to read them out also because they're also very telling. So from the Declaration of Independence of the US, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, they were endowed by, etc., etc. You know this, right? Whenever a form of government becomes destructive, they can rebel, etc., etc. Okay, I won't go into this. Look at the same relatively situated passage in the Declaration of Independence of Israel, right? In the year 5657, at the summons of the spiritual father of the Jewish state, Theodor Herzl, the first Zionist Congress convened and proclaimed the right of the Jewish people to national rebirth in their own country. This right was recognized in the Balfour Declaration of the 2nd November 1917 and reaffirmed in the mandate of the League of Nations, which in particular gave international sanction to the historic connection between the Jewish people and Eretz Israel and the right of the Jewish people to rebuild its national home. What right are we talking about here? We're talking about a very certain right, and it's not an individual right. It's the right of the Jewish people to their own sovereignty. And indeed, in the passage that I didn't read, this recognition by the United Nations of the right of the Jewish people to establish their state is irrevocable. This right is the natural right of the Jewish people to be master of its own fate, like all other nations in their own sovereign state. So when we're talking about rights, we're talking about a different order of rights. Rights in the Declaration of the Establishment of the State of Israel are not individual rights, though these will come. But first, we are addressing communal rights, collective rights, the rights of a people to be master of their own fate. I want to underline a certain sentence now in the Declaration of Independence of the United States. This is a sentence that is often neglected because of the star status of its previous sentence, right? Because we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men were created equal, that they were endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now look at the next sentence. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. This is a very important sentence. It means, basically, it says, why are we going to all this trouble, separating from the British Crown, indeed engaging in a civil war against our British brethren, etc., wanting to establish our own independent state, to secure these rights, which the rights, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, among other rights, etc. This is the reason why the United States is established. Now, again, the State of Israel has a whole different reason for its existence, right? This right is a natural right of the Jewish people to be master of its own fate. It's not to secure individual rights of individual Jews, because in 1948, that could already be done in the United States, for example, or in Britain, or in France, etc. It is to manifest or to realize the right of the whole people to independence and sovereignty. So there's a great difference there. And this difference is what situates the two nation states as completely different creatures, really. A creature, on the one hand, on the United States side, in which individuals come together to realize their own individual rights and liberties. And on the other hand, that a certain specific people comes to a certain specific place in order to be a sovereign people. And again, as you see in the text before you, this right is legitimized and recognized by the United Nations in all sorts of treaties and decisions of the UN Council and even before it, right? It's a known right. And indeed, by the way, of course, Israel is far from being the only state that is established to realize the sovereign right of a certain people, right? Any number of states have this reason that at their base, like Spain or Greece or Japan or Hungary, etc. These different countries have ethnic minorities in them, but they are the sovereign state of a certain people, right? In Spain, it's the Castilians. In Japan, it's the Japanese, right? And in etc. And in other
Sorry,
states,
you just froze when you said in Spain.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it's in Spain, it's the Castilian people. In Japan, it's the Japanese, etc. Right? Each state has a certain ethnic group that realize its sovereignty through the establishing independence in that state. Thanks for telling me, Arya, and please do so if my connection is jumps like that. Now, the State of Israel, or the Declaration of Establishment of the State of Israel, has a clause or a passage that lists individual rights, right? But it's worth reading it also. The State of Israel will be open to Jewish immigration and to the ingathering of exiles. It will foster the development of the country for the benefit of its inhabitants. It will be based on freedom, justice, and peace as envisioned by the prophets of Israel. It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, and sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. It will safeguard the holy places of all religions, and it will be faithful to the principles of the Charter of the United States. Now, this is a very nice list of rights, and people that are today protesting in the streets against the judicial overhaul of the current government have signs that are listing this exact passage. But again, notice the passage begins with particular rights of a people, open to Jewish immigration and the ingathering of exiles. This is the law of return that gives a right to individuals who are members of a specific people or a specific ethnic group, the Jews, to be granted aliyah and citizenship in the State of Israel. Now, where did these differences come from? And I want to take us back to the Middle Ages. We're not going to read this whole thing, don't worry, but to an idea that is called a social contract, an idea that begins with Hobbes, basically, or who articulated it very clearly for the first time. Then we have Locke, others, an idea that tries to explain how countries are formed, and in a deeper way tries to explain where the legitimacy of a certain regime comes from. The social contract says basically that we are all individuals coming together to form a society, and that we place a head of that society above us to be the executive and to administer, to make the decisions that we need in order to order our lives, really. Now, let's read just these two lines, right? The final cause and design of men who naturally love liberty and dominion over others. I'm sure we all here love liberty and dominion over others, just as Hobbes thinks, is the introduction of that restraint upon themselves in which we see them live in commonwealth is the foresight of their own preservation and of a more contented life thereby. So when we are running around as individuals, we are completely free. But being completely free, we can also we can kill or steal or do whatever we want. The problem is, of course, all that can be also done to us. So we come together to form a society to live in a little bit more secure way, obviously alienating some of our freedom. We are not completely free to kill others anymore. I'm jumping to the end. This done, the multitude is so united in one person called a commonwealth, in Latin civitas. This is the generation of that great Leviathan, or rather, to speak more reverently, of the mortal God, which we owe under the immortal God our peace and defense. So the state gives us peace and defense, being all individuals coming together to grant that, to choose a leader for ourselves and to be protected by our common agreement to be in such an arrangement. Perhaps you notice that if this social contract or the idea of the social contract arises in the 17th century, it also challenges the way 17th century regimes were the king. If we're talking about monarchy, the king would usually say, I have legitimate power over all of you because God gave this to me. God christened me to be your king, and so you must obey me. The idea of the social contract is thus also a critique of that form of legitimization of power. Power comes not top down, but bottom up. We all come together to elect or to give power to a certain leader. Now, I want to turn to a much more known thinker, certainly much more influential on the US, John Locke, and to his articulation of the social contract. Let's read this. Men all being natural, free, equal and independent, no one can be deprived of this freedom, etc., and subjected to the political power of someone else without his own consent, right? Consent is a key issue here. The only way anyone can strip off his natural liberty and clothe himself in the bonds of civil society is for him to agree with other men to unite into a community, so as to live together comfortably, safely, and peacefully in a secure enjoyment of their properties and a greater security against outsiders. Right? So this is the basic idea. We come together. Now, as opposed to Hobbes, Locke also listed a number of rights that the government or that the governing body has to secure for us in order to be legitimate. But though men who enter into society give up their equality, liberty, and executive power they had in the state of nature when we were running around as individuals, each of them does this only with the intention of better preserve. Sorry, I was jumping. I'm okay. Arya? Okay. So each of them does this only in the intention of better preserving himself, his liberty and his property, for no rational creature can be thought to change its condition intending to make it worse. So the power of the society or legislator that they create can never be supposed to extend further than the common good. It is obligated or obliged to secure everyone's property. And when Locke uses the word property, he means life, liberty, and possessions. Okay, and you can already hear the words life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, obviously. So the regime is obligated to secure our rights. And this is really the basis of what we saw in the United States Declaration of Independence. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. But when we are talking here about individuals coming together and forming a society, we are obviously not talking about a nation forming a state. We are talking about separate individuals running around in what they call the state of nature, basically completely free to do whatever they want, coming together in order to be more secure and the rights protected by giving up some of their freedom. This is not a community, a people, an ethnic group deciding to be masters of their own faith. It's a completely different idea. It's a much more individualistic idea, obviously. I want to read with you a summation of this idea written by Georg Simmel. Simmel was one of the fathers of sociology, living in the beginning of the 20th century, a Jew by origin, and he articulates this very clearly. Freedom and equality can be seen to belong together by right from the very outset. For if universal humanity, natural law man as it were, exists as the essential core of every man who is individualized by empirical traits, social position, and accidental configuration, all one needs to do is to free him from all these historic influences and diversions that ravage his deepest essence. And then what is common to all, men as such, can emerge in him as this essence. I'll break this down. Basically, Simmel is saying, in order for us to establish a society of free individuals, we have to think of ourselves as abstract individuals, as this core of individuality that is unencumbered by any characteristic that we may actually hold as ethnicity or religion or even gender. We are abstract humans, and we're coming together to be free in a society made up of abstract individuals. This is the idea of the liberal order and the idea of the liberal state that is manifested in its basically most perfect form in the United States. The idea of an immigrant society of individuals coming over and forming a state to secure these rights. This idea, again, is founded on the idea or on the concept of an abstract individual. Now, where did this concept come from? I'm taking us a little bit far into history because I think it is important to understand the very nature of this idea. And I would suggest that the idea of the abstract individual comes from St. Paul, from Paul the Apostle. I want to read to you a few verses from the letter to the Galatians that flesh this out. Look at this, look at what Paul is writing. For ye are all children of God by faith in Christ Jesus. For as many of you as have been baptized into Christ have put on Christ. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither bond nor free. There is neither male nor female. For ye are all one in Christ Jesus. And if you be Christ, then are ye Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. Paul's mission is to the Gentiles. He has to bring Judaism to a universal humanity. In order to do that, he strips Judaism of its ethnic character. And so he says to people, if you embrace Christ, you're all individuals. You're all free individuals. You're all abstract individuals. And it doesn't matter if you are Jew or Greek. It doesn't matter if you're bond, slave, or free. It doesn't even matter if you're a man or a woman. Imagine saying that in the 1st century AD. It's quite amazing, really. Now, Paul's idea of an abstract individual is totally hinged upon the connection, the redemption with Jesus Christ, obviously. Without Jesus, without God, there is no universal humanity that is coming together in that way. But as the centuries go, this idea forms into something else, into something that we today know as citizenship in a liberal country. And I want give this example, to give an example of how the same idea situates itself not vis-a-vis God, but vis-a-vis the state. And this idea, or this, and I will do this by quoting this text. This is the argument that Charles Sumner, as a lawyer, places before the Massachusetts Supreme Court. And this is a case against segregation of blacks in Massachusetts. It's a case of an 8-year-old black girl that in 1849 petitioned the state to let her study in a white school, right? Charles Sumner and another lawyer brought the case before the Supreme Court. They lost. But in 1855, Massachusetts was the first state in the United States to ban segregation by law and to, of course, allow integration through law. It's 1855, and Sumner had a very nice career. He later became a senator for Massachusetts, etc. But I want to read this text with you because, again, it shows how the Pauline idea, the Christian idea of an abstract individual that, by the way, is itself based on the idea of the image of God that we find, of course, in Genesis, that this essence in every person that is the same and is divine, how this idea becomes the model for the liberal order. Here is the great charter of every human being drawing the vital breath upon this soil. Whatever may be his condition, or whoever may be his parents, he may be poor, weak, humble, or black. He may be of Caucasian, Jewish, Indian, or Ethiopian race. He may be of French, German, English, or Irish extraction. But before the Constitution of Massachusetts, all these distinctions disappear. He is not poor, weak, humble, or black. Nor is he Caucasian, Jew, Indian, or Ethiopian, nor is he French, German, English, or Irish. He is a man, the equal of all his fellow men. He is one of the children of the state, which, like an impartial parent, regards all its offspring with equal care. So, we can analyze this text for hours and how we think, the categories here are very strange to us because we don't think Jews are a race or not white, etc. We can again go at it for hours, but what is important for me here is to show how the state replaces God in our relationship with the impartial superior that grants us our rights, right? The state as an impartial parent, right? Before the Constitution of Massachusetts, all these distinctions disappear. So we are neither Jew nor Greek. We are neither bound nor free. We are neither male nor female. We are just a citizen, which is granted their equal rights, right? So this is, in its very basic form, the liberal order, situated or based on the existence of abstract free individuals, unencumbered by different characteristics that they may hold as different matrices of their lives. But this idea, again, just because it is effective in treating everybody equally, is not effective in treating people as parts of collectives. And when we're talking about Jews, or we're talking about peoples in general, this idea misses out on the collective understanding, on the collective identity of a certain group. And I want to show how this plays out by two quotes from very important thinkers of the Enlightenment that are talking about giving Jews equal rights. So the first is Christian Wilhelm von Dohm. Dohm was a public servant and an intellectual in Prussia. This is 1781, okay? This is after the US Declaration of Independence, but before the French Revolution. And he says, the Jew is even more man than Jew. And how would it be possible for him not to love a state where he could be free, we could freely acquire property and freely enjoy it, where his taxes would not be heavier than those of other citizens, where he could reach positions of honor and enjoy general esteem? These human emotions would talk louder in his heart than the sophistic saying of his rabbis, right? This is Vendôme's argument for giving Jews equal citizenship, right? And the first sentence here, the Jew is even more man than Jew, creepy as it is really again articulating the very basic concept of liberalism. The Jew is more human than Jew, and so should get equal rights. The black is more human than black, and so should get equal rights. There is an inner essence that is more real than any characteristics that are put over it. The woman is more human than woman and should get equal rights. The homosexual is more, etc., etc. So this is the formula. But when Dom talks about this, he, of course, neglects to understand that the Jews are not only individual Jews, but are collectives, or are a collective, are a people. And when he wants to give them equal rights in Prussia, which is very nice, obviously, it's great. Again, I'm sorry, I forgot the word, but he ignores the fact that the Jews are also wishing not to get only individual rights, but a collective manifestation of their sovereignty. And here's another quote that again fleshes this out. This is Count Clermont de Tonnerre speaking at the National Assembly after or during the French Revolution, 1789, in France, obviously. And he said, from the Jews as a nation, everything must be denied. But to the Jews as individuals, everything must be granted. No recognition should be given to their judges. Only ours must be their judges. We must refuse to provide support for the continued existence of the Jewish community laws. They should not have a political body in the country or even a class. They must be citizens as individuals. Okay, so this again really places what we are talking about clearly, right? Jews are citizens as individuals. And the individuals, they must liquidize their collective systems, their collective institutes. They can be equal citizens only as individuals. Now, some Jews didn't want equal rights as individuals. They wanted something else. And what they wanted was a sovereign state, not only individual rights. And I want to bring to you Ben-Gurion's testimony to the Peel Committee. This is 1937. The Peel Committee was a committee established by the British to understand what's going on in Israel, right? After what is called the Arab Mutiny, there was a round of violence in 1936. And this is Ben-Gurion testifying before them. We do not intend to create in Palestine the same intolerable position for the Jews as in all other countries. It means a radical change for the Jewish people. Otherwise, there is no need for a national home. It is not to give the Jews equal rights in Palestine. It is to change their position as a people. It means a complete solution to the Jewish problem. It means making the Jewish people masters of their own destiny as any other free, independent people. All of the inhabitants of Palestine are children of this country and have full rights in this country, not only as citizens, but as children of this homeland. But they have it in their capacity as inhabitants of this country. We have it as Jews, as children of the Jewish people, whether we are here already or whether we are not here yet. So Ben-Gurion tells it very clearly. It's not about getting rights, getting individual rights. It's about changing the position of the Jewish people as a people. It's about making the Jewish people masters of their own destiny. This is what we are struggling for. Now, I have something similar from Jabotinsky, but I'm going to skip it. And I'm going to end with something from Charles Taylor. this is from, Charles Taylor is a very renowned thinker from Canada, from Quebec. This is from an article of his called The Politics of Recognition, 1992, and he's talking about whether it is possible for a community, for a collective, to, in a liberal way, decide a collective goal, right? Liberalism is very apprehensive of collective goals because it can, they force individuals into certain tracks. So, but Taylor thinks it is possible, and I'm going to read this, and we read a few passages of what he wrote. Those who take the view that individual rights must always come first, and along with non-discrimination provisions must take precedence over collective goals, are often speaking from a liberal perspective that has become more and more widespread in the Anglo-American world. Its source, of course, the United States. But a society with collective goals like Quebec violates this model. It is axiomatic for Quebec governments that the survival and flourishing of French culture in Quebec is a good, something that the state wants to establish. Political society is not neutral between those who value remaining true to the culture of our ancestors and those who might want to cut loose in the name of some individual goals or self-development. Policies aimed at survival actively seek to create members of the community. For instance, in their assuring that future generations continue to identify as French speakers. There is no way that these policies could be seen as just providing a facility to an already existing people. Okay, so he says it is possible. Taylor says, and let me open this up. It is possible to argue from a liberal standpoint that a certain state can provide help or provisions for a collective goal, the goal in Quebec of producing more Quebecese, more French-speaking, Quebec-identifying individuals. And for that, the state itself can set certain boundaries on what even individuals can do. Now, obviously, we are walking a very tricky path here because very easily we can get to a state that demands things from individuals that very severely inhibit their freedoms, their liberties. So Charles Taylor certainly recognizes this, and he says it's tricky, and also we have to always be mindful of minorities that have other collective goals and certainly other individual goals. So only a state that is very mindful and tolerant of all these limitations can work for a collective goal and still be considered liberal. But Taylor thinks it is possible. And so to come back to the beginning of our talk, and with this I will open for questions, is there such a thing as an Israeli? Was the Supreme Court of Israel legitimized from a liberal standpoint to say, no, there is no Israel wanted to maintain the Jewish people as the people who are sovereign and the only people who are sovereign in the state of Israel? I think it can be argued that it is possible if we remember that we are talking of a different kind of a nation state. We are not talking of a nation state of individuals coming together in order to secure these rights, right? To form a government that secures their own rights and liberties. We are talking of a nation state that is the product of a certain ethnic community or a people coming together in order to realize their own sovereignty in their own nation state. So I'll be happy now to answer a few questions. Arya?
Thank you. I think I'm having trouble. I don't know if anybody else is on bandwidth. Can you see me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So we'll do our best. Please feel free to chat your questions. Some of you already chat questions. Here are some things that have come up. Just going back to the beginning. So remind us on Israeli passports, if you're not Jewish, what does it say?
So it's not
because you're not an Israeli or ID cards, fine.
It's ID cards. It used to say religion and nationality, and you could have Jewish on both or Jewish only on the nationality if you were not Orthodox.
I don't know whether it's me or something, but you have frozen. Oh, Tomer, are you there?
I mean,
you froze there, so didn't hear the answer.
Sorry. Oh, am I good now? It's okay.
Yeah, so we're looking at the national identity cards. So if you're not Jewish, let's say you're Christian or Muslim,
So
does
you
it say
either
that on the card?
Muslim or Christian, and for a lot of Jews that came through the law of return but are not halachically Jewish, they have either nothing or of no religion in the nationality clause. I get that it's totally absurd, but that's what we have in Israel.
And then another question that someone asked, which is, it's basically true then, unless you're Jewish, can you become a citizen of Israel? Like in the United States, you can come here. In many countries, you live for a certain period of time, and then you become an American.
Okay, that's a great question. Theoretically, it's possible to simply come to Israel, let's say on a working visa or something, stay here, let's say, through some legal means, and a petition for a citizenship and get a citizenship. So theoretically, it's possible. Actually, it happens very rarely, and it's very difficult to do so. There is there's no clear law of neutralizing a person in Israel if they're not Jewish, or not only halachically Jewish, but according to the law of return.
So going back to the concept when you compared Israel and the system there to the US system, is Israel the outlier or is America the outlier in this approach?
Yeah, I would say America is the outlier. There are very few countries that are built as America is. I mean, as a state that is not that did not establish itself out of a certain people, right? As an immigrant society. So yes, the South American states are similar, but we know that they are much less liberal in their constitution, etc. And so, and Canada is in a way similar. But again, I think the United States, with its emphasis on individual rights and liberties, is standing out in this area as something very particular. And as I said before, there are so many states that are really states of a certain ethnic group, right? Again, the whole Balkan, obviously, I mean, the very fact that Yugoslavia or Czechoslovakia split into splinters and different independent states was because different ethnic groups wanted their own ethnic nation state. So that's what happened there. And again, Greece and Korea and Thailand, these are ethnic groups who are recognizing themselves self-consciously as different from their neighbors, and they want their independent states.
Is one of the challenges about having Israel, I guess, then from the Supreme Court's perspective as your nationality, the whole issue with Palestinians then, because then, or Arab Israelis, because then everybody would be Israelis and that would create other challenges to the system?
I wouldn't say Palestinians, but citizens of Israel who are not Jews are Israeli, obviously. And if an Israeli people is recognized, then the state itself would be the state of the Israeli people, right? Or at least logically, one would think that. And yes, the Supreme Court doesn't want that to happen. The Supreme Court, and by the way, in that goes according to the UN resolution in 1947 that said that the Jews have a right to establish their own separate state in the land of Israel. They also said that the Arabs have a right to establish their own separate state in the land of Israel. It's the same. This is a decision basically that legitimized a separate nation state for the Jewish people. And so the Supreme Court really is loyal to that rationale.
So,
and
right. So, go ahead.
yeah, sorry. I mean, just what I wanted to try to figure out with you today is how this is legitimate from a liberal point of view. Yes.
So then we discussed it with Masua, but you really didn't bring it up here. So then where do the individuals get rights and protections in Israel? There's these basic laws, correct? So how,
Right.
Yeah. So how does that work real quick?
Yeah. Doesn't have a constitution, and it does mention a few rights in the Declaration of Independence, but these rights are not enshrined in law. We have a few basic laws, chief among them, the basic law of dignity and liberty, right? Man's dignity and liberty, and the Supreme Court goes according or bases itself upon that law, that basic law, when it wants to strike down laws or decisions by the government that it thinks are infringing on individual rights. But it's a very sensitive and weak institution. Israel doesn't have a robust protection for rights of individual. The right of speech is not mentioned in any basic law. To give one example, so the Supreme Court has to juggle around or really make up its own authority to protect these rights, as it indeed did, if it wants to.
That's what brings us up today, I guess, in contemporary Israel. And can you, in just the last few minutes, talk about what the government's recent legislation that was passed does to the Supreme Court vis-a-vis maybe these rights, the individual rights that we in the United States and other parts of the world look at as being sacrosanct?
So great. So this is a great opportunity for me to say that all that I talked about today, again, the legitimization of collective identity, of collective sovereignty, all of this can be very easily tipped in balance towards ethnocentric hyper-nationalism that strangles individual rights and liberties. And I would say that, I mean, this is my opinion, of course, this is my analysis. This is what the current government wants to do. It wants to tip the balance and have Israel accentuate or underline so much the Jewish identity of the state. And here, when I say Jewish, it's even halakhically orthodox identity of the state, of the public sphere in the state, that really it obstructs and stamples, I would say, individual rights and liberties, certainly of non-Jews, but also of secular Jews, of women certainly, etc. So this is really what the struggle is about. A government that wants to strengthen its own power so much on the expense of the Supreme Court that that individual rights will not be protected as they were until now. And again, even until now, the protection was really not too robust. From the angle of strengthening what they see as the Jewish identity or the halachic identity of the state of Israel. That's really their project, and that is what the demonstrators in the streets are trying to prevent.
Well, I wanted to thank you for taking us on a deep dive. We probably learn much more about our own American democratic democracy than most of us knew, but it does tie into what's going on in Israel. And I guess fundamentally, I would say American Jews in particular are very engaged in what's going on. We see it in the news, and I think we understand it better now. But I think what we understand is that we have totally different systems. And so it's very hard, on one hand, to judge Israel on the system that we live with here in the United States. On the other hand, it does accentuate the challenges that Israel has, and you who live in Israel and the citizens of Israel have, and you know, I'm interested to see what this portends for our relationship between Jews of the United States and this type of liberal democracy and Israel. It's going to be a challenge if this continues, I think, because we just don't speak the same language.
Yeah.
But now we understand. At least we understand what language you're speaking now.
Exactly. First of all, we just need to understand, how the other side views the world, nation states, democracy, liberalism, etc.
But thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Sorry for some technical challenges today. I've had some network bandwidth issues, I guess, here. I hope the program worked out for all of you. Thank you, Dr. Persico. Looking forward to having you back with us next week for part 3, Religion and State in Israel, the End of the Status Quo. We're dealing with some very light issues here in the summer, but I will tell you, you will all be prepared for the fall. So anyway, take care, everybody. Good to see you. Have a nice Shabbat. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.